Hello everyone. I will talk you through the process of inserting data into MySQL using PHP. It will be a very simple one, and I think you will enjoy it. I'm sure. Okay, let's start from here. This is how things will going to be happening. I'll have a database here. I'll create a database called my company, and in the database I'll have one table called customer. You can have multiple table if you want, and then inside the customer I have only three fields. I have one is the ID, which auto increment. I have the name, which varchar 50 I think, and I have the phone, which again varchar. So that's my table. For that database which I have here, I will create a form to allow my user to submit their name and phone. I'm just using the most simple thing to make the idea clear for you, but you will have more than just the phone and the name. So the form will be in a PHP file, which we will discuss the details of that form later. Just this is the file. So I have a file that will produce this form, and when the user click on submit, it goes to another file called reg_add_php, which will take care of connecting to the database and taking the data from the form and storing it into the database. If everything is perfect, the user will get a message on screen saying new record created successfully. Okay, so that's simply how the design, but I just want to go and take you through the details. So let's now focus on this, which will produce the form. And as you can see here, we have a form, yeah, but there's something new in the form. We've been doing form in HTML and others, JavaScript, but here there is a method, something called the method. A method is how the data will be sent from that form to another page. And the method here we're using called post. And post is similar to get, but post allow you to post or send larger data than get. We will use get later, and I will explain some issues related to security and things like that. So you need a method, and you need, choose here, the method is post. Then you need an action. As you can see, all these are within the form. And the action means when the user click on submit, what will happen? It will take you to a file called reg_add_php. That's what we created. And the file, in fact, is this file, which we saw in the previous screen. So that's the sequence. It will have a post, it should have a method, post, action, and then the file it will take you to. Okay, now this form which you have on the screen, as you know, is coming from an input. The input here coming from an input control or component on your form. There's one thing we discussed last time in a previous video. Those inputs should have a type, and the type here I'm using is a text. Why? Because the name here is a text which I'm going to store, or the phone. So they are a text, type of a text. Yeah, so that's yeah. Now you remember in the database we discussed that we have a database, then we have a table. I think you understand the difference between database and table. The database is a collection of tables. And in this table, again, I have an ID, but the ID auto increment. Because it is auto increment, I did not add it to the form. I did not add another control for ID. I just added control for the name and for the phone, but nothing for ID. Okay? And that's because it's auto increment. Again, going back here, in the input, you should have an attribute called name. And name means what is the name of that input. Okay? So the keyword name must be used to help you gather data from the form. Now, the name for both, it should have a name. For every component, you will have a name. And then what are the names that I should choose as a value here? As you can see, I'm using name. I'm using name. Why? Because I want to correspond to my database. An advice to my student I always give, or to the people who are new to programming, it's always to be consistent. So if I use in my table a variable called name, when I come in the form, I call it name. I used one called phone. I used phone here. So phone, name, whatever you call it is there. Now the other question, we did not add ID here. Why? We said because it's auto-incremented. So the database, when we created, we selected that one as auto-incremented, and that means the database will take care of incrementing it from 1 to the whatever number it should be. The last thing you need in your form, as you know, you need a submit button, which will bring you this one here. Bring you the submit, and that your form is ready. Now for me, a practice I use, I create a third file or a separate file. I call it layout and layout.php. That's one. And layout.php, I put in that one all the CSS and any special things related to formatting page or things like that. So you just link it. And PHP allow you to use the command include, and you include an external file. Anything in that external file can be accessed from this page. So, and that will simplify thing. You notice here I used class container. This is from a bootstrap which I put in there. It has nothing to do with this tutorial, but that's something I wanted to know. If you want to do that, you need to start by declaring PHP, which with less than question mark PHP means that the code coming after this line is all PHP. And then you close it here. So means the code after this is HTML. Anything after question mark greater than is HTML. Anything after less than question mark PHP is PHP. And that's the way you do that. Great. So we are done with that. Now we need to move to this file. What is in that file? Which the user now, when the user click on submit, it will call that file, which is this one here. So what is in that file? And that's something we need to discuss. And I think it's important for you to understand this clearly as we are going through. So first thing in the file is we have less than $PHP, which basically means we are going to start using PHP. This is as we said before. Now here are some parameters. You have to close it again down here with using question mark greater than. Now these are the parameters you need to connect to the MySQL server. You need to know the server name, you need the username and password and the database. So here in our case it's a local host. I'm running it on a local machine, but if you have a specific URL address you can use here and you connect to specific server. Then your root, the password username I'm using here, sorry, the username that I'm using here is the normal root account, but which not advised. You should create a special username for your database connectivity to connect to the database. But I'm just for the simple demonstration, I'm using the normal root, and there's no password. And the database I'm connecting to is my company. which again the same thing. So these are the same thing, connecting from the database. So that name is critical. I cannot use a different name if I want to connect to that database. Good. So those four first lines will basically set up variables that can be used later to connect to the database. And those variables are used in the next line, which the connection, how to create connection. So the server is the server, the username, password is the password, and the database is the database. Now to create connection, you need this line. I start the line by creating an object called $connect. You can call it anything. Just for consistency on your coding, you have to stick to one, so you can refer to it easily. So $, and the $sign is important. $connect or con, and then the equal sign, and then new to create a new object, and then the class we're using here is MySQL. So basically this line will create the connection to the database. When you create connection to anything, first thing you need to test that connectivity. Is it working or not? If there is an error generated or not. So this line will check for errors. Sometimes the server address is wrong. Username may be wrong, password may be wrong, you're connecting to the wrong database. Something could happen, or maybe internet is down to connect to that remote server, or whatever it is. So this line take care of checking for the error. And if there is an error, we'll produce message on the screen. So this, up to here, we are connected to the database. Now, the next question, how we can get the data from the form and send it to the database. And here comes the next thing. You need to create a variable. And you can see I'm staying consistent. So the name here, basically I added just $sign to it. Why? Because in PHP, any variable should start by a $sign. So $sign name equal. Okay. So this name should be there. The other thing is post. You see the way it's written here, $sign underscore uppercase post. This is exactly has to be like that. If you come with post lowercase or p uppercase, and no, it will not work. That's the way it works. And this basically, when you use post, it get the data from here, or get it from here. So whatever this name is, the name here is here. So you take it from this name and store it in a variable called name. You notice the big bracket here, and again big bracket, quotation, semicolon. You follow exactly that. And this is a way you get data from a form component or control or input. So this is coming from the input, the first line, and that's it. And then if you look at this here, just to get clear that, if we just expand on this one here and just explain it to you with more details, you see the name here, which we use here, is this one. If we call this one X, we need to call it here X. Otherwise, it will not work, because post will retrieve data from here, which basically from here. Okay? And the same thing for the phone, which coming again the same thing. Good. So these two lines, basically what they do, they take data from the form. Whatever the user entered here, it will take it and store it in one. Will store it in a variable called name, and the other one will store it in variable called phone. If you have more variables, just you continue, you copy paste, and you add the next line, and change just only the variable name. Okay, so now we know how to get data from the form and store it into these variables. Now how we can insert that data into the database? We need SQL. So we need to run SQL statement. But before running statement, let's create the statement and store it into a variable called SQL, $SQL. So this is the variable, $SQL equal. Then you will say insert into what? Into the table. The table here, customer, which here the same, the customer. So we are inserting into the customer. So where are we inserting? We are inserting into the name, which the name into our table. So, and we're inserting into the phone, and which the phone. Now, what are the values that we inserting into name and phone? We inserting the value we captured from the form, which there are sign name, this one, which in fact coming from here, and we are inserting the phone, which coming from here, which actually coming from there, and these are the parameters that we going to do. This way we'll have a correct SQL statement that insert into customers, inserting into the name and phone, and the value coming from the form, which actually coming from here, which we will discuss in more details. Perfect. So this SQL now will have the right SQL statement. Now we need to execute, run that SQL statement. And this line does that. $connect con is this con. So the connection to the database. The connection database to run the query. This is how you like object-oriented. In Java use dot instead of dot. Here there is dash greater than query, and then $SQL, which this one. It means run this query. If this query runs successfully, and we're using 3 equal here because you want to validate the data type and the value as well. So if this line is not generating an error, means it did run successfully, it did insert the data into the database, then you will get an echo saying new record created successfully. Else, you will get an error. And that's how to validate it. So correct or error. And then at the end, you close the connection. You don't want to keep your database connectivity is going on, and you close it. So that's the whole thing of how you create a small application to insert data into MySQL. I hope you found this video useful, and thank you for watching.